Argentina says it plans to balance its budget by 2019. According to President Macri, they will tax exports to boost revenues. The South American country has become the latest casualty in the fallout for emerging markets, with EMFX sliding for the fifth month in a row. Joining me now down the line is Professor Steve Hanke. He's an applied economics professor at the Johns Hopkins University and is one of the world's leading experts on hyperinflation. He served as an advisor to President Rafael Caldera in Venezuela from 1995 to 1996. Steve, thanks so much for joining us. Now, of course, we've seen the central bank raise interest rates to 60%. That's the highest in the world. And we've seen the peso slump to a record low. You're the hyperinflation expert, so why are prices so out of control?
Well, for many months, actually many years, the central bank has been producing way too much money. So, and that's state money produced by the government. They have also let the banking system go out of control, and bank money produced by commercial banks has been expanding at a very rapid rate. And as a result, of course, you end up with a lot of inflation. Now, one reason they've been expanding the money supply so rapidly is that the central bank has in fact been financing a lot of the government's operations. So if you get behind it all, it's ultimately a fiscal problem in which the government runs massive deficits, and these are financed in large part by the central bank. It's just unbelievable. The central bank really should just be put out of business. It should have been in mothballs and in a museum long ago. The central bank in Argentina just creates one crisis after another crisis, with the peso collapsing one time after another. So the solution here is to get rid of the central bank, get rid of the peso, and officially dollarize the country.
So dollarization is the key there. We've got that meeting tomorrow between the finance minister of Argentina going to the IMF in Washington. What do you expect to come out of that?
Not much. The IMF is completely unoriginal in their thinking, and they will have very strict conditions put on the agreement that they have with Argentina. They might accelerate some of the disbursements of funds to Argentina, but the conditions will be a real squeeze for Argentina and a major depression, if not recession. And this means, of course, Macri's toast. He's toast anyway, because if he doesn't dollarize, he's just toast. Because if you look at unemployment in Argentina, that's a key indicator. It goes almost a perfect correlation with the popularity of the government. If unemployment goes up, popularity of the government goes down, and vice versa. And if you look at all the employment data, particularly in the construction area, which will be squeezed tremendously by the IMF agreement, there'll be a huge increase in unemployment in the construction industry, as well as the economy in general. Macri's popularity will go down, and the election comes up in 2019. There's almost no way he can win. He's a very unoriginal gradualist. He hasn't done anything big and made any of the right moves as president. And in addition, he's let the central bank go completely out of control in printing so much money and creating such an inflation problem. So he only has one choice. If he dollarizes, he wins the election because the economy will turn around on a dime. If he doesn't dollarize, he's lost.
So it's the same advice that you were telling me when we were talking about Venezuela last week. Dollarization is the key. Now, President Macri spoke in a televised address today and said that the peso's weakness has been exaggerated by the situation in Brazil and Turkey. So I'm wondering whether you agree with that contagion argument, or whether some of Argentina's issues are actually mainly idiosyncratic to its own domestic economy.
Well, he's completely got it wrong. I mean, he's getting such bad advice, it's just almost unbelievable. What was the first big currency that went down? The peso. It went down before the Turkish lira or the Brazilian real or the Indian rupee or the Indonesian rupiah or any of these other currencies. The epicenter of the contagion is all in Argentina. So he's just got the story wrong. It's like he brings the IMF in to rescue them. He forgets. He never knew that the IMF was the one who caused the complete meltdown in Argentina in 2001 when the IMF double-crossed Argentina and suspended payments out of an agreement that they'd agreed to that Argentina was actually meeting all the conditions for.
Now, you mentioned the crisis from 2001 there, so I'm wondering what parallels there are between the crisis in Argentina right now and the economic malaise back then.
Well, the situation was quite different then because they had a convertibility system, and the convertibility system, unfortunately, it was supposed to be a currency board, but it really never was. It was not constructed properly. So this is a situation with a lot of mistakes in Argentina then. They were different than the ones now. The common denominator is the IMF. The IMF was involved in 2001, and the ultimate meltdown in 2001 was caused by the IMF. It wasn't caused by Argentina. Argentina had made them a little bit of a mess they were in. They were in the middle of a crisis. The IMF was called in to bridge the gap and help them out of the crisis. And in fact, the IMF just poured fuel on the fire and caused the whole thing to collapse. Now we have the IMF coming in, and the fundamental system that they have in the exchange rate regime and central bank, of course, is not nearly as good as the convertibility system. But there you go. You got the central bank, the IMF. It's a cocktail for disaster.
So the IMF said that Argentina could begin to stabilize by the end of the year with a gradual recovery to start in 2019. So presumably you don't agree with that assessment.
Oh, no, not at all. The inflation rate is running 125% now in Argentina by my measure, which is very accurate. And the inflation and the interest rates are only 60%. That means that real interest rates are massively still negative in Argentina. It means that the peso is going to remain in trouble. And it also means the economy in general is going to remain in trouble because they'll just have to increase interest rates even more if they're going to stabilize the peso. So if they keep the same regime and they're in bed with the IMF getting bad advice, they're going no place.
All right, Professor Hanke, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
That was Professor Steve Hanke from the Johns Hopkins University. I'm Victoria Scholar, and thank you so much for watching IGTV. We'll see you very soon.
Subscribe to IG for educational content, company insight, financial analysis, and expert commentary.